Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at what industry assistance looks like today. So we talked about how it's moved away from providing assistance in terms of protection for industries. Now we're going to look at the types of industry assistance that will operate today and how they lead to long-term benefits for our aggregate supply and our productive capacity. So the first one is that they provide support for any business looking to innovate or provide or to invest in the future. So the government will provide support in the form of subsidies to help improve the productivity and international competitiveness of Australian businesses. So they'll provide subsidies if they think it's going to promote innovation and competitiveness. So the argument is that if you have an idea that's going to promote innovation, think of better ways to produce, the government would be willing to subsidise that if it's going to boost our aggregate supply or our productive capacity in the long term and help to achieve help to create an environment of low inflation, strong and sustainable growth and full employment. So these subsidies encourage firms to restructure, they encourage them to innovate, and all of that can lead to benefits in terms of our long-term growth. They will also provide funding and tax concessions for research and development if they feel it's in an area that's going to create positive externalities. So policies in relation to innovation that are going to boost our productivity and international competitiveness. The argument is without these subsidies, there will be an underinvestment in research and development. So the free market doesn't consider the third-party benefits or the positive externalities associated with their production, and therefore without some form of government assistance, innovation levels would be suboptimal and aggregate supply will be below its potential. So the government will step in and provide assistance in the form of subsidies that promote the production of goods and services with positive externalities in production or consumption. So therefore a more optimal allocation of resources will occur. So that might mean that there might be investment into health that's going to boost because there's an under-allocation of resources to health, which would be an example of a market failure. It could be environmental policies. It could be policies for just general research and development into new technology and innovation that are going to help boost our aggregate supply in the long term. So these policies can also help to reduce environmental damage, particularly at something like the direct action policies. But the idea is that to get investment up to a socially optimal level so that we take into account the positive externalities of certain forms of production. Other examples of industry assistance, providing support for businesses looking to invest in renewable energy, the idea that that will boost our intertemporal efficiency and reduce the negative externalities associated with burning fossil fuels. So we talked about that they're putting more money into the direct action policy. So there's $2.55 billion in this emissions reduction fund, with the idea that firms are more likely to invest in new projects because they're going to be subsidised, and that should help to boost our intertemporal efficiency in the long term. And we discussed that in the last video. Okay, another form of assistance that the government will offer is subsidies or grants to the agricultural sector after they experience a drought. So what can happen after a drought or other form of climatic negative impacts? Is that a word? That can lead to market signals, so it could lead to viable farms not being able to support themselves because their costs of production are likely to rise following a natural disaster. Many farms would not be viable and many farms would close down without industry assistance. So because these farms provide the community with positive externalities, so they give us a guaranteed food supply and they have environmental benefits from increasing the fertility of land, that all is considered a long-term benefit from having these sectors in operation. So the government will provide subsidies to help these industries to survive, because unlike industries like manufacturing, they feel that these businesses like agriculture have long-term benefits for the economy. They're not areas where we don't have comparative advantage. They're areas that just sometimes they suffer from high production costs and natural disasters and things like that. So it's different from manufacturing that don't have comparative advantage. These are sectors where we do. They just sometimes suffer from high production costs. Okay. Lastly, the last type of industry assistance they may give is what we call export development grants. So export development grants are administered by Austrade, and they're funded through the budget, and they allow our exporters to penetrate world markets. So the idea of these policies is that they reimburse expenses related to export promotion activities. So what that basically means in simple English is that if you spend money on advertising and marketing and promoting your business overseas, the government will give you up to 50% of these costs back. So the idea is that it's making it cheaper and more affordable for firms in Australia to advertise their products overseas, which will help to reduce businesses' costs, push the supply curve to the right because these businesses will be more willing and able to supply, and therefore should help to promote aggregate demand in the long term as we export more overseas. So they will provide funding for export development grants. In the next video, we'll talk about subsidies and the goals.